Hi, everyone. This is Melanie Yazzie, co-host of Red Power Hour. I'm joined here by some comrades, some from the Red Nation and from some other parts of the movement. And we're going to be talking today. We're doing a special episode about a case that is extremely important for the movement to understand what's unfolding. It's the Prairieland 18 or Prairieland 19. I'm not sure. I think it's the Prairieland 18 case. So we're just going to talk a bit today about the facts coming out of this. The trial happened, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. And so we have some comrades who've been tracking the progress of that case. We're going to try to do a little bit of political analysis about what the implications of this case are for the movement, as they are quite significant. But before we get into that, I wanted to hand it over to my guests today here for the podcast to introduce themselves, and then we'll just jump right into it. So I'll pass it over to you, Kristen and Cloud.
Hey, everybody. Hey, my name is Cloud. I'm a Red Nation member. Yeah, right. Like this case is really important. It's the Prairieland. 19 people have been arrested in connection with the case so far, right? Yeah, I'm excited to get into this discussion and just really inform people, like get the facts about the case, like what actually happened. Because, there's just like so much misinformation out there.
I'm Kristen. Cloud and I are partners, right? All of us have been friends and part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Left for a long time, even though we no longer live there, right? Like you said, it's 19 now because just this year, another person got arrested, Lucy Fox, for telling someone how to delete a Signal message, right? So that was the 19th arrest. So if you've ever told someone how to use Signal, right, you could go down for terrorism, apparently.
Hi, I'm Kels. I'm part of the DFW Support Committee. There have been a whole bunch of different things and different roles I've played, but luckily not a defendant, just actively involved.
Great. Well, welcome, comrades and relatives. Let's maybe start out talking about the case. Maybe we can talk about what actually happened on July 4th of 2025. Obviously, what happened versus what the feds are saying happened is obviously the difference is very important for how they've been constructing the case and the prosecution. And why don't we talk a bit about what happened and how defendants have been? All of them have been incarcerated, right? All the 18 and then the 19th, starting out here in 2026, they've all been incarcerated the entire time, right? Since they were picked up, maybe not that night, but I forgot the actual dates. It was not too long after that into July. So last summer when they were all picked up. So yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit first just about what the facts are of what happened, and then a little bit more about how the defendants have been doing inside. And they're not just defendants; they're your friends and comrades. So maybe Kels, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So there's one person who's currently out on bond. He's only facing state charges, Dario Sanchez. He was accused of support of terrorism for following someone's request to delete them from a Signal chat. Everyone else has been incarcerated the entire time. On July 4th, people decided to do a noise demo. Nobody seemed to think there was anything that was going to happen. Normal preparations were made, fireworks for 4th of July, pretty standard in Texas. Most of this is obviously secondhand. I was not allowed in the courtroom as the potential witness, so I'll let other folks talk about what they saw in the courtroom. But the officer allegedly drew his gun first and fired at the back of someone who was leaving the scene. This created a whole situation where 9 people out of the 11 were arrested that night and into the morning of July 5th. One defendant was not arrested at the location. They were arrested at their house in the following days. And one person, Ben Song, was not captured for 11 days. And there's a whole saga with them. And the way that went down, I wasn't a part of that. And so I'm not super comfy talking about it, because the people who were a part of that largely took cooperating plea deals. The two who didn't, or the one who was involved allegedly who didn't take cooperating deal, still, I don't want to comment on their case just in case things change, because like I said, we have no real idea what happened there, and that hasn't gone to court. In the following days, on July 6th, Rolando Estrada Sanchez, I always knew him as Des, went, "Hey, do you want a box of zines? I'm getting rid of them. I don't feel comfortable with them after what happened with his wife, Mari." And my partner and I, or my ex, and I, it's been a complicated year, y'all. My ex and I collect art and zines and books, as every leftist does. And so when I was like, "Oh, cool, you have zines? Yeah, absolutely, we'll take them." The federal government and their agents decided to follow him from his house to my house. And then when my roommate and I had left to go, he went to go hang out with friends. I went to go like decompress at the park. The FBI, the SWAT team, served a warrant to my apartment, broke a window through a flashbang into my living room, and then kicked down the door, tore my entire apartment apart, broke my cat tree, and just destroyed everything, and took a box of zines. Another group, one of the people who was allegedly there, was only connected there by a statement blurted out by one of the defendants, and her ID being in their car, which they were roommates. So, I don't know. Sometimes you leave stuff in your roommate's car. The FBI raided their house. The FBI raided several other people's houses in an attempt to intimidate and find any potential connections that were going on. For the most part, the arrests had stopped as of mid-September. However, in the past few months, starting with the new year, we've had one arrest that happened in, I believe, it's 90 days out from now. At the end of December into January, and then another person towards the end of January were arrested with not much on their charges.
When did the SWAT team raid your home, Kels? What day was that?
Ooh, July 6th. So July 5th, we found out everyone was arrested. July 6th, Des brought some zines over to my house, and in the morning, I think it was like noon or something, and then at like 6 p.m., the FBI decided to show up with a SWAT vehicle, announce our address, announce our names, and then break into our apartment.
I wanted to ask a couple more clarifying questions and then follow up on the raid and your experience with that and the aftermath of that. So the noise demo was outside of an ICE detention facility, correct? Where is that located? So where exactly did it happen?
Outside of Alvarado, Texas, which is kind of like a small town south of Fort Worth. Okay. This facility had been built in slated for 2015. I think it finished in 2016 under the first Trump administration.
Thank you for that. Just trying to give people like a place on the map that they can refer to when thinking about this. And so, what was the aftermath after, basically the FBI raided and destroyed your home? What was that experience like for you afterward? I guess in the immediate aftermath.
I mean, it was very disorienting. We couldn't stay at the house because they had broken glass in some of our furniture. There was broken stuff all over the floor. We had to go stay with the friend because they stayed in our house for about 6 hours, dumped out every cabinet, dumped out my lotions, dumped out my makeup, tore apart our bookshelves. There were 6 shelves full of books and zines. That was all torn apart and gone through. They took all of our electronics. We did have some guns in the house. They took those. Just literally everything that they thought could potentially be worthwhile. They scared the hell out of my poor cat. Because her home had been destroyed by a bunch of random people and there were people going in and out. I had to kind of disclose discreetly at work that I probably was going to have to be in and out for a few days because our apartment wasn't livable, especially since they threw a flashbang in. There were chemical things that we had to clean up. Very luckily, one of our friends offered their assistance in getting like some crime scene cleaners to help. It took a lot to get our house back to livable ways. And it's also like we live very close to a fire station. And now every time a fire truck goes off, I can see my roommate and I just both visibly tense and be upset because, yeah, it's probably not going to happen again, but it could. And we're almost always like, is this going to be the time?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what have been some of the long-term effects of that experience.
Yeah. A lot of it has made me slightly more cautious. If a cop stops someone in front of our apartment building, I am distinctly watching that and like almost recording that interaction, if not actually recording that interaction, because that's not a good thing. And we don't know if they are still watching us. We run a mutual aid project, and we noticed an increase of police presence around our mutual aid project because prior to this, it had been a very well-known project. People who had nothing to do with our organization or us regularly promoted it. A lot of the local nonprofits promoted it because it was a very easy, accessible, regular thing. And it affected our community because now these two people who were fairly consistent with mutual aid and maintaining this free store for years, now we kind of had to put a pause on some of that, and it scared a lot of people because it was very clear no one did anything wrong, but there were suddenly cops like actively watching.
Yeah, right. It's like the interesting thing about the case itself is the Trump administration would definitely be, has been going after us like every chance it can get. And it's like the Prairieland case just kind of happened to be the case that they latched onto, and just like created this wild, like, just wild narrative about an ambush attack on the Prairieland detention center, where like you see the administration was going after Stop Cop City, and then also Portland, right? It's like, and then the TILF Turtle Island Liberation Front thing that completely fabricated, but it's just like yeah, like they had been trying so hard to like go after us, after like Antifa, try to make Antifa a thing, like a terrorist organization, when it's really just like it just means like you're anti-fascist. Um, and yeah, so it's just like the administration is just trying so hard to create this boogeyman of like domestic terrorism, U.S. grown, U.S. whatever, U.S. grown terrorism, uh, under the guise of like anti-fascism and like being critical of like Trump and the administration.
And they scared away support a lot in the beginning by getting their narrative out there fast, framing this as a violent terrorist attack that everyone was in on, rather than a panicked person acting in self-defense and other people who were at a protest but were now a distance away from the scene, right? And when they framed it as this terrorist attack, I think just like liberals, people in the press were like, ooh, I don't want to touch that, or just thinking, oh, that can't affect me, but it affected so many people. It affected people who had already left the protest, who were across the street, far away from any sort of violence. It affected the families of the people who were taken, right? Des started being followed after his wife called him from prison, right? It affected the people who did jail support. They went after random Green Party people just for doing jail support. They went after people just like a big left chat, like a big left signal chat. They went after people for just like deleting people from that chat, or even just telling people how to delete people from that chat. So I don't know, the tendrils went really far with this whole guilty by association thing, to the point where, it scared a lot of locals into silence. And I think the only thing that has brought attention to this case is like locals like the support committee having the courage to speak out and bring attention to this, regardless of, what repression they may face for being framed as in association with it.
Has the support committee faced surveillance, or any other, I don't know, suspicious attention from the feds? Do you know?
I know that we've been surveilled. In general, one of the defense attorneys like casually mentioned it. And quite honestly, at this point, who isn't under surveillance, like that's gonna just be par for the course with these sorts of things.
I think they said they had like over 200 agents working on this, right? Working on literally just people went to a noise demo that went wrong. Like, talk about job creators.
So I wanted to shift a little bit to the actual charges that people are facing. Can you kind of list out what those are? Because we've been talking about domestic terrorism, but those aren't the only charges. Or are there like sub charges underneath like the category of domestic terrorism? Because there's obviously a range of charges for a range of like criminal activity. I'm putting that in scare quotes for people who can't see me. Or the alleged criminal activity that the prosecutors are charging them for. So yeah, what are the charges that folks are facing?
So at the federal level, they faced, well, it depends on the defendant because they kind of lumped everyone onto one superseding indictment. For example, Des had a charge of concealing documents and conspiracy to conceal documents. There was a charge of concealing or conspiracy to use fire explosives, using explosives, unlawful discharge of a firearm, discharging a firearm in furtherance of a crime, 3 attempted murder charges, a riot charge, and then material support of terrorism. I might be missing 1 or 2, but those were the primary ones.
And I'm assuming these are all felonies. I mean, some of them are obvious felonies.
Yes. All of these, I think, have a minimum sentence of like 3 years. Most of them go up to 15 to 20 per charge. There's a whole complicated way in which sentencing works at the federal level. One person has state charges. He will be doing, or he is set to have his trial on April 20th. And then the other 2 people that are currently in prison have not actually been indicted. They are simply in jail awaiting grand jury or indictment.
Wait, are these people who were picked up in July of last year?
No, the people who were picked up around January, the state of Texas has up to 90 days to hold people for felonies without charging them officially, with no indictment. Great system we have. So they have been in jail and they are either going to be indicted or they will be set free. But in the meantime, they're allowed to just be held there for 90 days.
Got it. Got it. Thanks for clarifying that. So, if I recall, there are, of the 19 defendants, there are some folks who are facing multiple charges, correct? And then other folks who are facing maybe 1 charge or 2 charge, or like maybe the less serious charges like conspiracy to conceal documents. I'm assuming that's a less serious charge than, attempted murder. And so generally folks are facing more than 1 charge, if I'm correct.
Yes, everyone is facing multiple charges. Des has the least amount with 2 charges. On a state level, Dario, whose trial is coming up, only has 1 charge, I believe, right now. But I'm sure they love to overcharge. Everyone else is facing almost every charge, minus a few people were not charged with attempted murder, but there were several who were.
For attending a noise demonstration?
Yes. They made the argument that anyone who was planning the noise demonstration should have anticipated the use of a gun and therefore were guilty of pulling the trigger as the person who pulled the trigger. So there were people who did not have firearms on them who were put in as an attempted murder charge for both ICE agents and the police officer that was shot.
And like part of the evidence that was used for that in court were IFAKs, like first aid kits. And they tried to say that because they had these first aid kits that could deal with something as severe as a bullet wound, that meant that they were anticipating and therefore planning a mass casualty event. And so, yeah, the evidence for the state gave for these people attempting murder was they were carrying first aid kits, literally. The other interesting move the state made was they tried to characterize the alleged shooter as a charismatic cult leader type character, right? So that they could say that any action this person made was actually signed off on by the whole group because the whole group were essentially their followers. And so there was this attempt made to make several of the defendants into cult leader types in order to force like collective responsibility.
Yeah, and this right, like this precedent or whatever, it's like known as the Pinkerton liability. So it's like, yeah, like the common example is like a bank robbers, right? Like, if you rob a bank and someone like shot an officer, then you would be similarly liable because you would have been like reasonably able to foresee, like when you're in a conspiracy, like whatever crimes that occur that you didn't actually commit yourself. So yeah, they're trying to wrap up, like it's similar to like with like RICO charges, like they're trying to just wrap, like, right, like guilt by association, just everybody or anybody who is like either there or just like tangential to like this group of people who just like attended a noise demonstration, right? It's like noise demonstrations are acts of love, of solidarity, because the Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas is like so isolated. And a lot of times people, right, like you feel like you're forgotten. And so like the noise demonstration with the fireworks on 4th of July is just like, hey, you're not forgotten. You have people who care about you, who know that you are facing terrible conditions right now. Um, and we are aware of this, and we are like, yeah, we are fighting for your release. You know, we love you. You have people who care about you. But yeah, just something as simple as a noise demonstration just gets turned into this, like, I don't know, clandestine like conspiracy to rush the gates and commit a mass casualty event, a terrorist event, right? Like, it's just absurd.
And like that's why, I don't know, it's important to stand in solidarity with the Prairieland defendants, right? Like there's a day of solidarity on April 4th. And it's because these are people who would do that for anyone else. These are people who were doing that for people they didn't even know, right? Yeah. And that's why I feel like compelled to be in solidarity with them, because I know if it were me, I know if it were anybody else, they would be in solidarity. They would be, you know, I think that's why they were taken in this pre-crime thing, right? Because they're the people who would be in solidarity with people in detention.
Yeah, right. I just actually remembered. So one of the people who was at the Prairieland Detention Center when on the 4th of July was Leka Cordia, who recently got released. Who was like held at Prairieland for about a year. Who was in connection with the Palestine Solidarity encampments in Colombia. She was part of that, right? She was held at the Prairieland Detention Center when this was all happening. So she like, yeah, like she probably heard those fireworks and that noise. But yeah, like that just like shows like, you know, that's just like the direct connection we have. Like all of our movements, everything, um, are connected. And yeah.
Yeah, so you started to describe, particularly Kristen and Cloud, a little bit more about like what happened at the trial. Can we dig into that a bit more and just describe? So, when did the trial happen? When did it conclude? What was the outcome of the trial? And then, what were some of like your key observations or takeaways from that?
Ooh, yeah. Let me just check real quick, right? Because
That's a big
so
question.
well, yeah, right. Um, so the first right, the trial was supposed to start on March 10th. Right? Or was it the
February. It was
Oh,
supposed to
sorry,
start.
February. What am I doing? Yeah,
It's
February. There we
supposed
go.
to start February 17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. February 17th after President's Day. Right, yeah. So right, like that was supposed to be the start of the trial. But that first day during jury selection, like Trump appointed judge Mark Pittman, he declared a mistrial that same day. Uh, and his like reasons for it was because one of the defendants was wearing a shirt that like, or sorry, one of the lawyers, the defendants, the defense attorneys was wearing a shirt that depicted civil rights leaders. And this was like the day that Jesse Jackson had passed. So, but like during the jury selection, the people who were inside the court and who were watching it, they like nobody noticed this shirt. Like the shirt was not like, you know, it was like under a blazer, like you couldn't really tell what was going on. But the judge singled her out and used that as like grounds for dismissing or declaring a mistrial and basically setting the start of the trial a week later in an effort really to fish for a better jury, because like the jury, this first like group, I think like 90 people, like throughout the day, in the questioning, a lot of them had like negative opinions of ICE. Like some people, yeah, like have, yeah, just had negative opinions of ICE. Some were like more okay with open carry, with carrying guns and like bringing, Second Amendment rights. So this wasn't like the ideal jury that Judge Pittman had in mind, and so um, yeah, like that's like kind of like the reason we believe that he declared the mistrial. Just found a reason to declare this mistrial, and then started 1 week later on February 23rd with like opened up the jury pool to I think like 120 people, and also requested to have a smaller courtroom. And like this was a courtroom that mostly did like traffic violations, so it was like much smaller. And even then, like the people, like the overflow room for when there wasn't room inside the courtroom, that was like an hour away in Dallas, Texas, uh, by CCTV, which reportedly had like a lot of connection issues and would like cut out like all the time. So it's just like, prohibiting, effectively prohibiting like family members and the press and like people from actually like, you know, uh, seeing the trial, right? Just like making it less public. But yeah, like that was like that first week that I was part of. But yeah, I don't know.
And then like I stayed for a little while longer, and I mean, one, having the smaller courtroom meant that supporters, family, friends, reporters couldn't get in. And who did pack the courtroom was law enforcement. And so it gave this sense that, like, the defendants didn't have, people who loved them in their lives and didn't think they were terrorists. The courtroom was full of just law enforcement, and every defendant had like a Homeland Security officer assigned to them as if they were a threat in the courtroom. So there were these optics, like they were an imminent threat at any second within that courtroom, and they had very little support, right? And that was what was created with the smaller courtroom. And, it kind of went downhill from there. Any objection the defense raised, the judge sided with the prosecution every time, to the point where some jurors even seemed to be like in tears about the number of times the judge sided with the prosecution, didn't let objections, right? He allowed evidence from an illegal search and seizure, right? They disallowed a self-defense argument for the alleged shooter, even though they had a gun pointed at them, and a Texas Ranger said that he would have acted the same in that situation, but that became disallowed, right? Of course, at any left trial, they disallow any sort of context, right? Anytime the defense would try to explain, well, what about deaths at Prairieland? Why might someone protest Prairieland? That was shut down. Any sort of questioning, like that was shut down. And so really it was the prosecution's show, and yet they still played the victim. They pretended like, oh, we only have the state prosecution. They have so many lawyers that were against. And it's like, they have so many lawyers because you indicted so many people on random stuff. And you have the full power of the state, a judge on your side, and the fact that you literally tortured people into false confessions. Like, how is that not an advantage?
And if I recall, this judge, the judge that was chosen to oversee this trial, is someone who usually does like traffic stops. So someone who's like really uh not qualified to be a judge for this type of like high profile kind of federal case? Hmm.
Yeah, right. It's just like this judge is just like, yeah, like cast into this role of like, being in charge of the future of our like First Amendment rights, or a right to like to protest, um, and to like show any kind of like dissent. Um, but yeah, to get back to the trial a little bit too, it's just like uh, the narrative that the state had constructed of this like Antifa terrorist like ambush attempt. Um, yeah, it largely rested upon like fabricated witness testimonies, which even like the prosecution's witnesses, like the officers, the security guards at the detention center, and the responding officers, like they're like there's a lot of like contradictions when they were on the stand. And they often had to go like be reminded of this like testimony that they even said like that they did not write themselves, that they did not even sign. So it's like you have just like, yeah, just all these like inconsistencies and contradictions that are just like stacked up in the prosecution's, in the state's case and their narrative. Yet at almost every turn, basically it's just like there's holes like all throughout it. But for some reason, this the defendants were still like found guilty of all the charges, which like towards the end of the court, during the actual like jury deliberations, there's like some controversy as to like what actually happened in that jury room, because like even people who were like at the court, they said that at one point they heard just a loud commotion coming from the jury deliberation room, and that apparently two of the jurors got into a fight, like a physical fight, and had to be separated by the U.S. Marshals. And even after that, during whenever the judge was reading the the charges, or like the guilty not guilty, the verdict, two like a number of the jurors were crying visibly when they were being read. So it's like there's a lot of speculation about like jury coercion of some sort that maybe happened, but like we don't know. We weren't part of that. And the I think the defense attorneys, like, yeah, they need to like interview the jury. They're allowed to do that now. So I don't know if like anything is coming from that. I don't know if Kels knows more about it, but yeah, like there's just a lot of like, yeah, just like fishy things. Um, and just like if you look through the court notes, each day there's always just like something like, yeah, just wild accusations, and just the holes that are like poked through the state's narrative. Um, yeah.
I mean, that fireworks are actually explosives, right? Even the judge was barely buying that. Even the cops admitted, no, we did not handle them like explosives. We did not call the fire marshal. We did not put them in a special explosives room. In fact, we sent them via FedEx without any sort of hazard form, right? So are they really explosives? Was this really a riot? How do you have a riot with like 9 to 12 people? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And like one person doing graffiti, what? How do you have like a terror cell? Half of these people like barely know each other. They just like went to this noise demo together, right? And they were only able to build the whole terror cell case that they wanted because of the cooperating defendants, because the cooperating defendants did not write their own plea deals. They signed on to ready-made plea deals written by the state, and they all said nearly the same thing, that this was a coordinated Antifa terror event, that this is an Antifa terror cell, and that this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person are part of Antifa, right? And even the cooperating defendants were showing some remorse on the stand, right? Being like, yeah, I just signed this. I didn't really say any of this. I just signed my name to what they told me to, right? And cooperating defendant Lynette Sharp was super emotional, crying on the stand because she had been literally tortured, denied medication, denied sleep. She had not slept in a month when she signed her plea deal. And she had only 3 days to decide, and she didn't even remember the events that she was allegedly testifying to. 2 of the cooperating defendants admitted that like their lawyers told them to just say whatever was necessary to reduce the charges, and that they were like willing to lie if necessary, right? All of the cooperating defendants were threatened with extraordinarily long sentences, like 99 years, like stuff that wasn't even legal, right? So it's like, are you going to get 99 years? Or are you going to sign this, right? And so the prosecution had such a bad case in court, which is why some of us were a little optimistic for a second, because, even the cooperating defendants were like, I was coerced into signing on to these lies. And yet they were still somehow convicted of them by a jury that had up until that point seemed very sympathetic.
Wow. Thank you for, I think, filling out that context and painting that picture. So how many of the defendants became cooperating defendants? How many of them signed plea deals?
We got Sykes, Juniper, Susan Kent, Lynette Sharp, Nathan Bauman. That's who I know, right?
Yeah, there were 5 who took cooperating plea deals and 2 who took non-cooperating plea deals.
So that's 7 total out of how many people actually went to trial in February? Was it
9 people went to trial. Yes, so there were 8 people who went to trial who were actually present or allegedly present for the events of the noise demo. Seth Sykes took a cooperating plea deal. Nathan Bauman took a cooperating plea deal. Des wasn't physically there, but obviously was one of the defendants. Rowan, aka Joy Gibson, and Rebecca both took non-cooperating plea deals as part of the, for lack of a better word, manhunt section of the case. Susan Kent, Lynette Sharp, and John Paul Thomas were also part of Joy Gibson was actually there. Rebecca was not there. They are non-cooperating. And then Lynette Sharp, John Paul Thomas, and Susan Kent were all part of the quote-unquote manhunt. And they took cooperating plea deals.
So when you're referring to manhunt, what are you talking about specifically?
So after the events of July 4th happened, the alleged shooter, Benjamin Song, fled into a forest, woody kind of area, and then made their way to, I think it was a gas station or a hotel. Still a little fuzzy on that point for me. And made contact with people to come get them. And then they were transported from that area to one of the people's apartment, allegedly. And most of the people who took plea deals were part of that situation. Kind of an after the fact thing.
I understand. And the non-cooperating plea deals, what is like the primary difference between a cooperating and a non-cooperating plea deal, would you say?
Sure. So cooperating means those were the people who went and turned state's witness, and that we saw in trial. So they willingly cooperated with the FBI and the police to betray their friends, for lack of better words, including lie about what they were doing, whatever kind of needed to happen. Non-cooperating means that they agree to the statements of fact. Those are legal terms, of what happened with them specifically, but they do not agree to collaborate. They won't be witnesses. They simply say, yep, I had an IFAC, or yes, I did this. But they don't then turn around and say, like, and so also did this. They just admit to their guilt.
I mean, I imagine it's very common for federal prosecutors to turn folks on each other to intimidate and to coerce defendants into becoming cooperating witnesses against other defendants. Um, and given the context of what you kind of laid out for the remarkable miscarriage of justice, and what frankly just sound like extremely illegal acts kind of at all stages of the process, leading up to the trial, during the trial, and I'm sure we'll see more here in the aftermath of the trial because the defendants still need to be tried for the state charges, right? This was just the trial for federal charges. Yeah, so there's more to come. Have you all thought about like what this means for activists and for like movement people, given the fact that this case is being reported and kind of discussed as kind of a test case for kind of a larger kind of blanket repression of activism of all stripes and kinds, especially if like Antifa is now designated as a domestic terrorist organization as of September 2025, even though it's not like a conspiracy, it's not even an organization, it's like, just some loose term that people use just to describe general anti-fascist work, which, it comes from a lot of different places within the movement across the political spectrum. Um, and so the trial itself and how the feds built the case and then how defendants handled that as well as the lawyers, are there any kind of like takeaways or lessons from that, for folks who might be facing this kind of prosecution in the future, given like the whole point of this case is to make it so that they can arrest a lot more people in the movement and on the left, in the US. So this is essentially a precedent setting case.
Yeah, there's like a lot of different takeaways from this. One is that dissent is becoming illegal. It doesn't matter if what you're doing would be considered like a constitutional protection, like having zines. That's not applicable at this point. Making sure that your movement understands like the potential risks and that those risks have escalated drastically in the past few years, or really the past year. But I personally always recommend that people have jail support forms, so that if you are arrested, someone outside of the action knows what happened and knows what to do with your pets, if you have children, if you need medication. Do we tell your job? Do we not tell your job? Those kind of key vital parts of information can be really helpful. It was very hard at the beginning to be able to contact people's families and let them know like what happened to their loved ones. If their loved ones are okay, where are they going, that they didn't just disappear off the face of the earth. Make sure that you kind of like take care of each other about that. and start preparing networks to take care of those things? Is there someone who does animal rescue who can take in a potential animal that needs help? What grants are around to help if a elder family member needs to take in a child that they weren't prepared for? How do we pay your bills if you need at least temporary assistance so that when you get out, you have a home to go back to, you have your stuff to go back to? These are all like very practical matters on top of like, start considering what you would need if you were arrested. What kind of lawyer would you need? Are there legal networks around you that work on these cases? Or like in our case, Texas doesn't really have a lot of movement lawyers. This would have tried out very differently in a different part of the country. So, like, what legal resources are around, and are they trustworthy? Are they good at this? This is a precedent-setting case. This is the first Antifa trial, and just like with any trial law, what they win here, they win for other people. So our defendants have been very cognizant of not good protester, bad protester, because it doesn't matter if you were doing everything right or if you did something wrong. They're all in there. If you haven't, there's a great guide called the Tilted Scales Guide to Being a Defendant. The Tilted Scales Collective has really come through on some legal advice, not intentionally. They didn't give it, but their book was really helpful for us to read and kind of go through like, what is a political defense and what does that look like? And how do you defend yourself without throwing other people under the bus?
Yeah, right. In terms of like lessons learned from the trial, right? I think everybody should check out the court notes. Check out prairielanddefendants.com. That's the website that the DFW Support Committee is using. They have all the information on that website. Like, please go check it out. They have like fundraisers, right? You can contribute and donate to their legal defense fund. That's probably the biggest thing that you can do if you're not actually in DFW to help out, because lawyers cost money, right? It's just like most of the defendants had court appointed lawyers. Like there's not like an endless like fund for like for this, right? Because Antifa as an organization does not exist at all, right? We don't have like funding. It's just like people, right? These are just like tattoo artists, mothers, fathers, parents, right? If you do find yourself in a similar situation, if you are detained, I think the most important thing to take away is do not talk at all. Like, do not talk to the cops. They will lie to you about everything, about what they can charge you with, about what the other people are saying, right? Like, I think we need to have trust in our support networks that they will help us, and we support us. Like, we cannot we can't talk because the prosecution's like case, their entire narrative case rested upon like absurd charges and just like flights of fantasy with like their narrative of like this ambush, right? Like, a lot of their narrative was substantiated or like gave them more I don't know, more yeah, substance because of the testimonies of the cooperating defendants. The people who cooperated, they helped give that narrative much more like standing. So yeah, if it was just the prosecute, like just their narrative alone, it would have been almost impossible to like actually convict them. But because of the statements from the cooperating defendants, it gave them more more ammo to like actually like follow through with this. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't convict you if they don't have the evidence, but they can convict you of a lie if they have a cooperating defendant willing to sign on to that lie. And the sad part is the cooperating defendants probably would have less time themselves, even had they not signed on to these lies that admitted Antifa terrorism, right? That will up their sentence too, and it allows everyone to be convicted on a lie. It also allows any protester in the country to be construed as Antifa and convicted on that same lie, right? So on the one hand, I'm a little selfish and want to be like, give all your money to the Prairieland Defendants Legal Fund, but also like this is coming for you too, right? And you need to prepare where you are. You need to get your lawyers in order and also like legal funds, right? So give some money to the Prairieland Defendants and give some money to a legal fund in your community too.
Thank you for all of that. I was thinking as you were talking, and this isn't about like the culpability of those who became cooperating defendants and witnesses for the state, but it's not just that you are betraying or turning on your own friends and comrades. Some of them, even strangers, like because some of them didn't even really know each other. They had all just shown up to what I'm assuming was just like any protest or rally or noise demo. People just show up if they know what's happening and they feel compelled to go. So it's not just the consequences don't just stop at the case, right? Like the consequences of signing a plea deal that was authored by the state. And from what I can tell, I haven't read it, but I think Kelsey mentioned this, like what the actual language, what they were actually agreeing to in the plea deal, that sets the precedent for like, as you were saying, Kristen, absolutely everyone following that. And so it's not just, turning on these other handful of people who are in this courtroom or are facing these charges. It's creating, it's providing, like you said, Cloud, the ammo for this narrative to be applied legally moving forward. In every single context, when it comes to every single activist that is deemed kind of an enemy, I guess, of the state. And so the stakes are really high, I guess, is something that this case has really taught me. The stakes are really high, and the potential scale is really massive. And so that isn't to like freak everyone out, right? Or to silence people or to make them stop, engaging in the movement. Like we have to continue to build revolutionary struggle. But it is like we need to be very, very serious about how we are conducting ourselves, not just when we're going out on the streets or, engaging in resistance, but when some of us invariably will face, and by us, I just mean like people in the movement, invariably face like legal repercussions. How we handle those situations also might have like massive implications. Um, and and so yeah, it's not about any type of blame or responsibility. I mean, they were tortured and they were tortured into like quote unquote confessions or whatever to signing these plea deals. State repression happens in all of those ways. And yet, yeah, I think it's just incredibly important to be disciplined and to really understand like what you are getting into, um, and then how to handle those situations. Because my understanding is that there was also like prosecutors exploited like personal relationships between some of the folks who did know each other, probably some conflicts that existed between some people. These are all kind of like, I don't know. I think we kind of all know that the feds use these tactics and exploit these tactics to get false confessions or to get folks to sign on to plea deals or to turn on their friends and such. But um, yeah, I think even in our relationships with each other, I would say in the movement, what it kind of demonstrates to me is also discipline. Also discipline in how we conduct ourselves. Not to say that like we're gonna somehow that's gonna like save us, from being targeted by the state. But yeah, what we do might really have blowback and reverberate for like a huge community of people. And so what does it mean to move when you know that like your responsibility is to like a kinship or like a relational network that is maybe millions of people? And I think if anything, that makes us stronger if we're more accountable to each other, and we move with more discipline. I mean, even like the revelations about Cesar Chavez, that have come out over the last week and a half or so. Um, I've been thinking a lot about accountability. We've been talking a lot in the Red Nation about how can we be more accountable to each other in the movement. And so this makes me kind of think through that in a different way as well.
Yeah, I think especially now it is important to like move intentionally and like understand who's around you and what your actions can do. Are you prepared for the fact that you might not have done anything, but that the state will narrate that? Are you prepared for the fact that they lie and they threaten you? Yeah, like some of these people were being threatened with impossible sentences that don't exist. In Lynette's case, she talked about when they arrested Benjamin Song, they walked her out to the fence and were like, see, we got him, so now we don't need your cooperation, deal is off. Like, that's torture. She's older. These are horrible people doing horrible things. And understanding that that will impact you and it will impact all of the people around you. So when you do things, be prepared for the fact that there is a lot of consequences. But that also means that we owe it to each other to be willing to face those consequences together.
Well, I think to round out this discussion, because I feel like we're maybe heading towards a conclusion, what's next? What's next for the Prairieland 19? Are there any like court dates that have been announced? Are there ways that I know you mentioned earlier, Cloud, about the support committee and like the legal support fund, but are there ways that folks can support the defendants or the lawyers? So yeah, what's next? And then what are some ways people can support?
Sure. We definitely love it when people donate. Lawyers are so expensive, and especially because there are so many people who need lawyers, and the fees and everything. But we also encourage, like, on April 4th, we're asking for a day of solidarity, be that banner drops, letter writing, a benefit show, just something to show that they're still being supported, that this isn't a one and done situation. Would be great. We love to see those things. We love to see how other communities are interacting with this like horrible event. The state case has not moved forward yet for everyone else. Even the defendants who took cooperating plea deals for the federal charges still face state charges. Their plea deals did not cover those, so we don't know what that looks like yet. And the next court date will be for Dario Sanchez, who was accused of deleting someone from a group chat after they were arrested. And checking his court date and the notes from there. If people would like to come out for those, that would be great. But right now we're just kind of looking for that solidarity, April 4th, and for any donations that people want to give so that we can keep paying these lawyers and dealing with commissary and all of that other mountain of stuff. And writing letters to defendants. That's like a big deal when you're in prison, is to show that oh, there are other people out there still, and they're thinking of me.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that this is just the first trial that occurred in this large case of the Prairieland defendants. So yeah, we still have like state trials, and then there's also the appeals for the verdict that just passed, right? So there's a lot that we can plan for, and I think the most important thing is to participate in these like acts in these days of solidarity, to keep up with the trial, to support the support committee, um and just like help spread just like mass awareness of who, like, what happened with the Prairieland defendants, who they are, because these are people, right? These are just like people, like, um yeah, just like, our friends. um but also, what the support committee, yeah, as part of like, acts of solidarity, is, letter writing campaigns, maybe starting like your own book club. There's a list of the zines that was in the box that Des had. There's a list of zines online of like, this is what he was arrested for, these are like this is the evidence of terror, right? With these zines, like, have like seriously just engage with the materials, that with the literature that they're being like prosecuted, that's being used against them. Also, another ask is to carry out a noise demonstration. There's ICE facilities everywhere, and yeah, these people deserve to know that, like, yeah, we do care about them, like, we're making noise about it. And also just to like dispel the I don't know, like, noise demonstrations are not like violent. They are not inherently dangerous. Any kind of rally or protest, these are just like people who are coming together in acts of love and solidarity. Like, that's what this is fundamentally about, and that's what's being criminalized right now. So yeah, like, help support the support committee, right? Like the DFW support committee, Kels, like, all y'all have been like doing such amazing work on the ground. um it's inspiring, really. And yeah, follow them on Instagram, DFW Support Committee. I think they have a Blue Sky and a Twitter account. But yeah, DFW Support Committee, help them out. And also, locally, wherever you're at, just start building those relationships and networks with people around you, because we are our biggest support and our strongest, like, we are at our strongest when we're together. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, comrades, for coming on and talking about this. Uh, we'll provide links to both the YouTube and the podcast, the audio for this podcast recording, to the support committee and to the various resources that folks mentioned. Um, yeah, we'll be back with another episode of Red Power Hour in a couple of weeks. My co-host Elena will be joining. But all solidarity to the Prairieland defendants, and to everyone in struggle. Really, we must continue to fight the good fight. And as you said, Cloud, operate out of a spirit of love and solidarity always. Thanks, folks, for listening.